The morning sun painted the Nebraska sky a soft orange when 22-year-old Rose O'Sullivan stepped out of her small cabin. She never imagined this would be the last normal morning of her old life. Rose had come to Pine Ridge Settlement 3 years ago with her younger brother Daniel. They were Irish immigrants like many others seeking a fresh start in America. Their parents had died during the potato famine back home, leaving Rose to care for 14-year-old Daniel. She worked as the town's school teacher, while Daniel helped the blacksmith. The settlement was small, maybe 60 people in total. Everyone knew everyone else. There was the general store run by old Mr. Peterson, the church where Pastor Williams held Sunday services, and about 15 small houses scattered around the main dirt road. Rose loved teaching the children, even though the school was just one room with wooden benches and a few old books. That October morning started like any other. Rose was preparing lessons when she heard Daniel calling her name urgently. She rushed outside and saw him running toward her, his face pale with fear. "Rose, you need to come quick," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Mrs. Johnson's baby is burning up with fever." "She's asking for you." Rose had learned some basic healing from her grandmother back in Ireland. In a small frontier town, everyone had to help however they could. She grabbed her basket of herbs and remedies and followed Daniel to the Johnson house. Little Mary Johnson was indeed very sick. Her tiny body was hot to touch and she was barely breathing. Rose spent 2 hours caring for the baby, using cool cloths and giving her small amounts of willow bark tea. Finally, the fever broke and the baby began to breathe normally again. Mrs. Johnson was crying with relief. "Rose, you saved my baby's life." "I don't know how to thank you." Rose smiled tiredly. "Just seeing little Mary better is thanks enough." As she walked back to her cabin, Rose noticed something strange. The settlement was too quiet. Usually children would be playing outside, and women would be hanging laundry or chatting with neighbors. But today the streets were empty. Then she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. War whoops echoing across the prairie. Indians. Someone screamed from the direction of the main street. Rose's heart started pounding. She had heard stories about raids, but Pine Ridge had always been peaceful. The local Lakota tribes usually traded with the settlers and kept to themselves. But something had changed. Maybe it was the recent battles between the army and various tribes. Maybe it was the hunger that came from being pushed off their hunting grounds. Whatever the reason, today was different. Rose ran toward her cabin, but she could already see smoke rising from several buildings. The general store was on fire. People were running everywhere, some toward the small fort at the edge of town, others just running in panic. "Daniel!" she called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos. She reached her cabin and threw open the door. "Daniel, where are you?" No answer. Her heart sank. He must have already gone to the fort with the others. That was good. That was the plan they had always talked about if something like this ever happened. Rose was about to leave when she remembered something important. The school had medical supplies that Dr. Matthews had left there last month. Bandages, medicines, things that could save lives. She couldn't just leave them to burn. Against every instinct telling her to run, Rose headed toward the schoolhouse. The building was still standing, but she could see riders moving between the houses. Some were setting fires. Others were looking for anything valuable. She slipped inside the school through the back door. Her hands were shaking as she gathered the medical supplies into a large sack. Bottles of medicine, rolls of clean bandages, surgical tools that Dr. Matthews had taught her to use. These supplies could mean the difference between life and death for injured people. Just as she was about to leave, she heard hoofbeats stopping right outside the school. Rose's heart hammered in her chest. She looked around desperately for a place to hide, but the one-room schoolhouse offered nowhere to go. The door burst open. 3 Lakota warriors stood in the doorway. They were painted for war with fierce expressions that made Rose's knees weak. The leader was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his chest. His eyes swept the room and landed on Rose. For a moment, nobody moved. Rose clutched the sack of medical supplies against her chest, as if it could somehow protect her. The warriors spoke to each other in their own language, voices low and urgent. The leader stepped forward and pointed at the sack Rose was holding. He said something in Lakota, then tried in broken English. "Medicine?" Rose nodded, too scared to speak. The warrior's expression changed. Instead of the fierce war look, she saw something else, desperation, need. "You heal?" he asked, pointing at her and then at the medical supplies. Rose found her voice. Yes, I help sick people. The three warriors talked among themselves again. Rose caught a few words that sounded urgent, worried. Then the leader made a decision. You come, he said firmly. It wasn't a request. Two of the warriors moved to either side of Rose. They weren't rough, but they made it clear she had no choice. The leader took the sack of medical supplies from her hands and examined the contents. His face showed relief when he saw the medicines and bandages. As they led her outside, Rose saw the full extent of what was happening. Most of the settlement was burning. The few people who hadn't made it to the fort were being gathered together. She recognized the baker, Mr. Williams, and a few others, but she didn't see Daniel anywhere. Please let him be safe at the fort, she prayed silently. They put her on a horse behind one of the warriors. As they rode away from Pine Ridge, Rose looked back at the only home she had known in America. Smoke rose from the burning buildings, and she wondered if she would ever see this place again. The war party moved quickly across the prairie. Rose had never been this far from the settlement. The landscape was beautiful in a wild way, with rolling hills covered in tall grass that moved like waves in the wind. But she was too scared to appreciate the beauty. After several hours of riding, they reached a river where more warriors were waiting. Rose saw that she wasn't the only captive. There were two other settlers, an older man she didn't recognize and a young woman from a neighboring settlement. But what shocked Rose most was seeing some of the warriors. Several were wounded, with bloody bandages wrapped around arms and legs. One young warrior was unconscious, tied to his horse to keep him from falling. His face was gray with pain and fever. Now Rose understood why they had taken her. They didn't want her as a captive in the usual sense. They needed her skills as a healer. The leader approached her again. In his broken English mixed with gestures, he made the situation clear. Their medicine man was dead. Their warriors were dying from infected wounds. They had seen her healing the Johnson baby and heard people talk about her knowledge of medicine. You heal our warriors, he said, pointing toward the wounded men. You save them, we keep you safe. They die. He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Rose looked at the wounded warriors. Despite her fear, her healer's instincts kicked in. These were human beings in pain, and she had the knowledge and supplies that might save them. She nodded slowly. I'll do what I can. As the sun began to set, the war party continued toward their camp. Rose rode in silence, thinking about Daniel and hoping he was safe. She also thought about the wounded warriors who needed her help. She had no idea that among those wounded men was someone who would change her life forever. A young warrior whose life hung by a thread, and whose survival would lead to a love story that would become legend among his people. The Lakota camp appeared before Rose like something from a dream. Dozens of teepees stood in a large circle, their buffalo hide walls glowing golden in the setting sun. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and she could hear children laughing and playing despite everything that had happened. But as they rode closer, Rose noticed the sadness that hung over the camp like a dark cloud. Women were crying softly outside some teepees. Old men sat with worried faces. This wasn't just a war camp. These people were suffering. The leader, who Rose learned was called Chief Red Hawk, helped her down from the horse. Around them, people gathered to stare at the white woman who had been brought to their camp. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed anger. A few women pointed at her and spoke harshly in Lakota. Chief Red Hawk raised his hand for silence. He spoke to his people in their language, and Rose caught a few words that sounded like medicine and heal. The crowd's mood seemed to shift slightly from anger to hope. An older woman with kind eyes came forward. She was Chief Red Hawk's wife, and she spoke a few words of English. I am Winter Moon, she said gently. You come. We show you. Rose followed Winter Moon through the camp, carrying her sack of medical supplies. She saw more wounded warriors sitting outside teepees, some with bandaged arms, others with leg wounds that looked infected. The recent battles with the cavalry had taken a terrible toll, but it was clear that one warrior was in worse shape than all the others. Winter Moon led Rose to a large teepee at the center of the camp. Even before going inside, Rose could smell the sickness, the sweet, terrible smell of infection and fever. Inside the teepee, lit by a small fire, lay a young man who was clearly dying. He was perhaps 28 years old, tall and strong-built, but now his skin was gray and covered in sweat. His breathing was shallow and fast. 2 bullet wounds in his chest and shoulder were badly infected, the flesh around them red and swollen. He had been unconscious for days. "This is Tall Bear," Winter Moon said quietly. "Chief's nephew. Strong warrior. Good man." Her voice cracked with emotion. "He fights soldiers to protect children. Now he die." Rose knelt beside the warrior and gently touched his forehead. His skin was burning hot with fever. She had seen infections like this before, and she knew he didn't have much time. Chief Red Hawk entered the teepee behind them. His face was grim as he looked down at his nephew. "Our medicine man died from spotted sickness 3 moons ago," he said in his broken English. "No one left who knows healing ways. We try everything. Nothing works." Rose opened her sack and began examining her supplies. She had some good medicines, but this infection was severe. It would take more than just medicine to save this man's life. "I need clean water," she said. "Lots of clean water. And clean cloths." Winter Moon nodded and hurried to gather what Rose needed. As Rose began to work, more people gathered outside the teepee. She could hear them talking in worried voices. It was clear that Tall Bear was loved by his people. His survival meant more than just one life. It meant hope for the entire tribe. Rose carefully cleaned the infected wounds with water that had been boiled and cooled. The flesh around the bullet holes was so infected that she had to cut away the dead tissue. Tall Bear groaned in his unconscious state, but he didn't wake up. "This medicine will help fight the infection," Rose explained as she applied honey to the wounds. "My grandmother taught me this. Honey fights the bad spirits that make wounds rot." Chief Red Hawk watched everything she did with intense attention. "If he lives, you live. If he die—" He didn't need to finish, Rose understood. Her life depended on saving this warrior she had never met before today. Working by firelight, Rose cleaned both wounds thoroughly and applied the strongest medicine she had. She wrapped the wounds with clean bandages and then prepared a tea from willow bark to help with the fever. "We need to get liquid into him," she said. "Even though he can't wake up, we can give him small amounts of tea." Winter Moon helped Rose lift Tall Bear's head while she carefully gave him tiny sips of the bitter tea. Most of it ran down his chin, but some went down his throat. As the night wore on, Rose worked tirelessly. She changed his bandages every few hours, gave him more medicine, and used cool water to try to bring down his fever. Several times his breathing became so shallow that she thought he was gone, but then it would strengthen again. Chief Red Hawk never left the teepee. He sat across the fire from Rose, watching her every move. Sometimes other warriors would come in to check on Tall Bear's condition, their faces showing the grief they all felt. "He was best among us," Chief Red Hawk said during one quiet moment. "Fast horse, true arrow, brave heart. But more than warrior. He speaks for peace. He says we must find new way to live with white men." Rose looked up from changing Tall Bear's bandages. "He wanted peace? Yes, many of our young men want only war. They say white men take everything, so we must fight until we die. But Tall Bear says this brings only death for our children. He says we must be smart, find way to protect our people without fighting wars we cannot win." This surprised Rose. She had always heard that all Indians wanted to fight the settlers. She had never considered that there might be different opinions among them, just like there were among white people. "What does Tall Bear think we should do?" she asked. Chief Red Hawk was quiet for a long moment. "He says we must learn white man's ways while keeping our own ways. He says some white people are good, want to live in peace. If we can find these good ones, maybe we can share the land." As dawn approached, Rose was exhausted. She had been working for almost 8 hours straight. Tall Bear's fever had come down slightly, but he was still unconscious. The infection was fighting the medicine, and she wasn't sure who would win. "You rest now," Winter Moon said kindly. "I watch him." Rose shook her head. "If I stop now, he might die. I have to keep fighting for him." She continued applying cool cloths to his forehead and giving him small amounts of tea and medicine. Her hands were steady, but inside she was praying to every saint she could remember from her childhood. Around midday, something changed. Tall Bear's breathing became deeper and more regular. His skin, which had been gray and clammy, began to look more normal. When Rose checked his pulse, it was stronger than it had been all night. "I think the fever is breaking," she told Chief Red Hawk, hardly daring to hope. For the next several hours, she watched Tall Bear carefully. Slowly, gradually, his condition improved. His fever continued to drop and his breathing became normal. The infection was losing the battle. As evening approached, Tall Bear's eyes fluttered open for the first time in days. He looked around the teepee in confusion, his eyes finally settling on Rose. Here was a white woman he had never seen before, sitting beside his bed with medicine and bandages all around her. "Who?" he whispered in English, his voice weak but clear. Rose felt tears of relief flowing down her cheeks. "My name is Rose. I'm here to help you get better." Tall Bear tried to sit up, but Rose gently pushed him back down. "You need to rest. You've been very sick." Chief Red Hawk moved quickly to his nephew's side. He spoke rapidly in Lakota, explaining what had happened. As he talked, Tall Bear's eyes kept returning to Rose with an expression of wonder. When Chief Red Hawk finished speaking, Tall Bear looked directly at Rose. "You saved my life," he said in careful English. Rose smiled. "We're not finished yet. You still need to heal completely. But yes, I think you're going to live." Outside the teepee, word spread quickly that Tall Bear was awake. People began gathering, talking excitedly. Children who had been silent for days started laughing again. The dark cloud that had hung over the camp began to lift. But for Rose, the real surprise was yet to come. As she looked into Tall Bear's eyes, she saw something that made her heart skip. Intelligence, kindness, and something else she couldn't quite name. She had saved his life, but she had no idea that in doing so, she had set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. Winter Moon brought food for everyone, and for the first time since arriving at the camp, Rose felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to survive in this strange new world. And maybe, she thought as she watched Tall Bear slowly sip some broth, there was more to these people than she had ever imagined. Over the next 6 days, Rose barely left Tall Bear's side. What started as a desperate fight for his life slowly became something else entirely. As he grew stronger, they began to talk. At first, their conversations were simple. Tall Bear spoke better English than Rose had expected. He had learned from traders who came through their territory, and he was eager to practice. Rose, meanwhile, picked up Lakota words quickly. She had always been good with languages. "Where you learn healing?" Tall Bear asked on the 3rd day. He was finally able to sit up without feeling dizzy. "My grandmother in Ireland," Rose replied, carefully rewrapping his shoulder wound. "She said healing hands were a gift from God. My job was to use them to help people." Tall Bear watched her gentle movements as she changed his bandages. "Your grandmother was wise woman. In our ways, healers are sacred. They touch the spirit world." Rose had never thought of her simple remedies as touching any spirit world, but she didn't argue. She was learning that the Lakota saw connections between things that white people kept separate. "What were you doing when you got hurt?" she asked. Tall Bear's face darkened. "Soldiers came to winter camp. Said we must move to reservation. But children were sick, old people too weak to travel. I tried to talk, find peaceful way. But soldiers would not listen. They started shooting." Rose stopped what she was doing. "You tried to make peace?" "Always I try peace first. War brings only death. But sometimes," he shrugged carefully, mindful of his wounded shoulder, "sometimes you must fight to protect your people." As the days passed, Rose learned more about the man she was healing. Tall Bear wasn't just a warrior. He was a storyteller, keeper of tribal history, and one of the few young men who believed the Lakota could find a way to survive in the changing world. "Tell me about your people," Rose said one evening as she prepared his medicine. Tall Bear's eyes grew distant. "We were free people, followed buffalo across great grasslands, summer camps by clear rivers, winter camps in sheltered valleys. Children learned from grandparents. Young people learned from elders. Everyone had place, everyone had purpose. What changed? Gold found in Black Hills. Sacred mountains to us, but white men see only gold. Then came wagon trains, railways, soldiers. Every year more white people, less land for us." His voice carried deep sadness. "Government makes promises, then breaks them. Says we must live on small pieces of land, learn white man's ways, forget our own ways." Rose felt a pain in her chest that had nothing to do with her own situation. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Not your fault," Tall Bear said gently. "You are not like the others. You have healing heart." On the 4th day, Tall Bear was strong enough to walk outside the teepee. Rose helped him, worried he might fall. The entire camp seemed to celebrate seeing him on his feet again. Children ran up to touch his hand. Women smiled and called out blessings, and warriors nodded with respect. "They love you," Rose observed. "I am part of them. They are part of me," Tall Bear replied. "This is Lakota way. Individual and tribe are one spirit. That afternoon, Chief Red Hawk visited them. He looked at his nephew with obvious relief and pride. Then he turned to Rose. "You have done great thing," he said. "Tall Bear is like son to me. His father died fighting for our people when Tall Bear was young boy. I raised him, taught him warrior ways and wisdom ways." Rose nodded respectfully. She had learned that Chief Red Hawk was not just a war leader, but also a wise man who carried the responsibility for his people's survival. "But you," the chief continued, looking directly at Rose, "you gave him back to us. Our medicine man always said that sometimes healing comes from unexpected places. You are that unexpected place." That evening, Winter Moon brought Rose a beautiful dress made of soft deer hide, decorated with colorful beadwork and quills. "You cannot wear white woman's clothes in our camp," Winter Moon explained kindly. "People need to see you belong here while you heal our warriors." Rose looked down at her torn and dirty settler's dress. It seemed like something from another lifetime. "What about my hair?" Rose asked. Her red hair was unusual among the Lakota. Winter Moon smiled. "Hair color is gift from spirits. We braid it in our way, but keep the fire color. Very beautiful." As Winter Moon braided her hair, Rose felt something strange happening. She was changing, becoming someone new, not just her appearance, but something deeper. "Do you miss your old life?" Tall Bear asked that night as Rose checked his wounds one final time. The question surprised her. "I miss my brother Daniel. I worry about him every day. But the rest?" She paused, thinking. "I was just a school teacher in a small town. No family except Daniel, no real friends. I taught children to read and write, but I never felt like I was truly helping anyone. And now? Now I feel like what I do matters. Like I'm using the gifts God gave me for something important." By the 6th day, Tall Bear's wounds were healing cleanly. The infection was completely gone and his strength was returning quickly. But Rose noticed something else. She didn't want to leave his side. It wasn't just because she was afraid of what would happen to her when he no longer needed healing. It was because she enjoyed talking with him, learning from him, seeing the world through his eyes. "You saved more than my body," Tall Bear told her as she prepared to sleep in the corner of the teepee where Winter Moon had made a bed for her. "You saved my spirit too." "What do you mean?" "When I was shot, I was angry. Angry at soldiers, angry at government, angry at white people who take our land. I was becoming like young warriors who want only war. But you..." He struggled to find the right words in English. "You show me that healing is stronger than hurting. That some white people have good hearts." Rose felt her cheeks grow warm. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Tall Bear said firmly. "You did what few people would do. You risked everything to save enemy. You worked day and night for stranger. You have brave heart and healing hands." That night, Rose lay awake thinking about everything that had happened. A week ago, she had been a simple school teacher worried about lesson plans and Daniel's future. Now she was living in a Lakota camp wearing Indian clothes and caring for a wounded warrior who talked about peace and healing. But the strangest part was that she didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. She felt like she was discovering who she was meant to be. On the 7th morning, Tall Bear stood up without any help at all. His wounds were well on their way to healing, and his strength had returned. Chief Red Hawk examined his nephew and declared that the healing was complete. "You have done what our medicine man could not do," the chief told Rose. "You brought dying warrior back to life. This is powerful medicine." Rose felt proud but also worried. If Tall Bear was healed, what would happen to her now? As if reading her thoughts, Chief Red Hawk continued. "Other warriors still need healing. And winter comes soon. Tribe needs someone with your skills." So Rose stayed, moving from teepee to teepee, caring for wounded warriors and sick children. She learned to combine her Irish remedies with Lakota healing practices. The tribal elders taught her about healing plants that grew on the prairie, and she shared her knowledge of treating fevers and infections. But always, she found herself returning to Tall Bear's teepee. He was completely healed now, back to his duties as a warrior and storyteller, but somehow, they had become friends in a way that surprised them both. "You are different from other white women," Tall Bear said one evening as they sat by the fire with Chief Red Hawk and Winter Moon. "How?" "You listen. Most white people talk but do not hear. They think their way is only way. But you learn our ways, respect our ways." Chief Red Hawk nodded approvingly. "Tall Bear speaks truth. You have become bridge between two worlds." Rose looked around the teepee at these people who had become so important to her. Maybe that's what I was meant to be. What none of them knew was that soon Rose would have to make the most difficult decision of her life. A decision that would determine not just her future, but the future of her growing love for the man whose life she had saved. 2 months had passed since Rose first arrived at the Lakota camp. The autumn leaves had turned golden and red, reminding her of her own hair, which now hung in traditional braids decorated with small beads that Winter Moon had given her. Rose had settled into a rhythm of life she never could have imagined. Each morning she would make rounds through the camp, checking on anyone who needed healing. The Lakota people had fully accepted her as their medicine woman. Children would run up to her with scraped knees, and elders would ask her advice about aching bones. But it was her evening conversations with Tall Bear that had become the most important part of her day. "Tell me about Ireland," Tall Bear said one cool evening as they sat by the fire outside his teepee. He was carving a piece of wood while they talked, his skilled hands creating beautiful shapes. Rose pulled her buffalo hide shawl closer around her shoulders. It was green everywhere, rolling hills covered with the most beautiful grass you've ever seen. But there was sadness too. The English controlled everything. Irish people couldn't own land, couldn't practice their religion freely, couldn't even speak their own language in schools. Tall Bear looked up from his carving. "This sounds familiar." "Yes," Rose said softly. "I think our people have more in common than I ever realized." "What brought you to America?" Rose stared into the fire, remembering. The potato crop failed year after year. People were starving. My parents died of hunger and sickness when I was 18. Daniel was only 10. I used every coin we had to buy passage on a ship to America. You were alone with young brother, like I was alone with tribe responsibilities when my father died, Tall Bear observed. The ship was terrible, crowded, dirty, people sick and dying. They called them coffin ships because so many died on the way, but we survived, Daniel and I. We thought America would be the promised land. And was it? Rose considered this. Better than Ireland in some ways. We had food, we had work, but we were always outsiders. People called us names, said we were dirty Irish, said we took jobs from real Americans. Daniel wanted to prove we belonged, so he worked harder than anyone else. I became a teacher to show we weren't ignorant. Tall Bear set down his carving and looked at her directly. But you never felt like you truly belonged. Never. Until... Rose stopped herself, realizing what she had been about to say. Until now? Tall Bear finished gently. Rose felt her cheeks grow warm. I shouldn't say that. This isn't my world, why not? You heal our people. You speak our language, you understand our ways. What makes someone belong to a place? This was the kind of question that Tall Bear often asked. He had a mind that looked at things from angles Rose had never considered. I don't know, she admitted. I always thought it was about being born somewhere, having the same skin color, speaking the same language. My grandfather once told me, Tall Bear said thoughtfully, that the earth belongs to everyone, but people belong where their spirit finds peace. Over the following weeks, their conversations grew deeper. Tall Bear told her stories of Lakota history, legends of their people, and his own dreams for finding a way forward in a changing world. Before white men came, we lived in harmony with all things, he explained one night as they watched the stars. We took only what we needed from Earth, gave thanks for everything, lived with the seasons and the animals. It sounds beautiful, Rose said wistfully. It was good life. But now everything changes. Buffalo disappear. Government pushes us onto smaller and smaller lands. Young warriors say we should fight until we die rather than live as prisoners. But you don't agree? Tall Bear was quiet for a long moment. I think there must be third way. Not surrender, not war to the death, but something new. Way to keep our spirit while learning to live in new world. Rose had been thinking about this too. In Ireland, some people said the same thing. Keep our culture, our stories, our music, but learn English ways too. The ones who refused to change starved. The ones who changed completely lost their souls. Yes, exactly. This is what I try to tell our council. We must be like the willow tree that bends in strong wind but does not break. As November arrived and the weather grew colder, Rose found herself helping with winter preparations. She learned to dry meat, preserve vegetables, and prepare medicines for the long months ahead. The work was hard, but she felt useful in a way she had never experienced as a schoolteacher. One evening, as she was grinding herbs into powder, Winter Moon sat down beside her. "You're happy here," the older woman observed. It wasn't a question. Rose looked up from her work. "Is it that obvious?" "To my eyes, yes. You smile more now than when you first came. You laugh with the children, sing while you work. This is not the face of prisoner." Rose continued grinding herbs, thinking about Wintermoon's words. "I never expected to feel at home here. And my nephew? You are happy with him too?" Rose's hands stopped moving. She hadn't realized that others had noticed how much time she and Tallbear spent together. "He's a good friend," Rose said carefully. Wintermoon smiled knowingly. "Among our people, when unmarried man and woman spend much time together, talking by the fire, sharing thoughts and dreams, this usually means something more than friendship." Rose felt her face burning with embarrassment. "I hope I haven't caused any problems. I know I'm not Lakota. You have healing hands and kind heart. This matters more than blood or skin color," Wintermoon said gently. "But I wonder when time comes to choose, what will you do?" "Choose? Army will want their prisoners back. There will be negotiations, exchanges. You will have chance to return to your people." Rose had been trying not to think about this possibility. But Wintermoon was right. Eventually there would be prisoner exchanges. She would be offered the chance to go home. "What do you think I should do?" Rose asked. Wintermoon smiled. "That is not for old woman to say. But I will tell you this. I have watched my nephew since he was small boy. Never have I seen him look at woman the way he looks at you. And never have I seen him talk with anyone the way he talks with you." That night Rose lay awake thinking about Wintermoon's words. She had been trying to ignore the feelings growing in her heart, telling herself it was gratitude or friendship or just the strange circumstances that made her feel close to Tallbear. But she could no longer deny the truth. She was falling in love with him. The next morning, Tallbear asked her to walk with him to the river. The day was cold but sunny, and ice was beginning to form along the edges of the water. "Rose," he said as they stood watching the river flow, "I must tell you something." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" "When I was dying, I had dreams. Dark dreams of spirits calling me to other world. But then I heard voice calling me back. Sweet voice speaking words of healing and hope. When I opened my eyes and saw you, I knew you were the voice that saved my spirit." Rose looked at his serious face, seeing emotions there that made her breath catch. "Since then," he continued, "every day I am grateful not just for my life, but for the gift of knowing you. You are unlike any woman I have ever met. White or Lakota?" "Tallbear," Rose started, but he held up his hand. "Please let me finish. I know you are not of my people. I know you have life in White World, brother, who waits for you. But I must tell you what is in my heart. When I think of future, I cannot see it without you." Rose felt tears starting in her eyes. "I feel the same way. But how could it ever work?" "We're from different worlds, are we?" Tallbear asked, stepping closer to her. "You heal our people with love. You learn our ways with respect. You see beauty in our customs, wisdom in our elders. You belong here more than some who were born here. But my brother would be welcome here too if he chooses. Good blacksmith always needed." Rose looked into Tallbear's eyes and saw her future there. A future unlike anything she had ever imagined, but one that felt more right than any dream she had ever had. "Are you asking me to stay?" she whispered. "I am asking you to follow your heart. If your heart leads you back to White World, I will understand. But if it leads you to stay with me, to become my wife and partner in building bridge between our peoples." He reached out and gently touched her face. "Then I will spend my life making you happy." Rose closed her eyes and felt the last of her doubts melt away. When she opened them again, she knew what her answer would be. But before she could speak, they heard horses approaching the camp. Riders were coming, and Rose's time for choosing was about to arrive sooner than either of them had expected. The riders approaching the camp carried white flags tied to long poles. Rose's heart sank as she recognized what this meant. The army had come to negotiate for prisoners. Chief Red Hawk emerged from his teepee, his face grave. Other warriors gathered around him, their hands resting on their weapons despite the peace flags. Wintermoon came to stand beside Rose, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Negotiation party," Tallbear said quietly. "They come to trade for captives." Rose watched as 5 soldiers rode into the camp, led by a cavalry officer with silver bars on his uniform. Behind them came 2 men in civilian clothes, probably government agents or interpreters. Chief Red Hawk walked forward to meet them, his dignity and authority clear in every step. He spoke briefly in Lakota to his warriors, then addressed the soldiers in English. "You come under peace flag. We honor this. What do you want?" The officer dismounted and approached respectfully. Rose was surprised by his polite manner. She had expected soldiers to be more aggressive. "Chief Red Hawk, I am Major Harrison. I come with authority from the territorial governor. We wish to discuss exchange of prisoners." "We have no prisoners," Chief Red Hawk replied calmly. "We have guests." Major Harrison looked confused by this distinction, but the government agent beside him stepped forward. "Chief, we know you have taken white settlers from recent raids. We're prepared to offer fair exchange. Horses, weapons, supplies your people need for winter." Rose felt sick to her stomach. They were talking about trading her like a sack of grain or a horse. Chief Red Hawk's expression didn't change. "You offer to buy our guests? This is insult." "No insult intended," Major Harrison said quickly. "We're here to arrange safe return of civilians to their families. And if guests choose to stay with us?" The major and agent exchanged glances. Clearly, this possibility hadn't occurred to them. "Well, I suppose, if they truly chose freely. But we'd need to speak with them directly to be sure they weren't being coerced." Chief Red Hawk nodded slowly. "This is fair. But choice must be real choice, not made from fear or pressure." Rose realized that Chief Red Hawk was giving her exactly what Tallbear had spoken of, a true choice. He could have refused to let the soldiers see her at all, or he could have handed her over immediately to avoid trouble. Instead, he was respecting her right to decide her own fate. "We will make camp nearby tonight," Major Harrison said. "Tomorrow we meet again, speak with all captives, discuss terms." As the soldiers rode away to set up their camp about a mile from the Lakota village, Rose felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had less than 24 hours to choose between two completely different lives. That evening, the entire camp seemed subdued. Everyone knew that tomorrow would bring changes. Some of the captured settlers would likely choose to return to their old lives. The delicate peace of the last few months was about to end. Rose sat by the fire with Tallbear, neither of them speaking much. Finally, he broke the silence. "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart wants to stay with you," Rose answered honestly. "But my mind keeps thinking about all the reasons why it might be wrong." "Tell me these reasons." Rose stared into the flames. "Daniel is my only family. He must be worried sick about me. He might think I'm dead. We could send word that you are safe and happy, maybe arrange for him to visit. The life would be so hard. Winters on the prairie, always moving, never knowing if there will be war. Life anywhere is hard," Tallbear pointed out. "White settlements have their own dangers. Disease, crop failures, violence. Here you would have people who love you. Work that gives your life meaning. People in the outside world would never understand. A white woman married to an Indian warrior? They would call me names, say I was crazy or a traitor." Tallbear was quiet for a moment. "And what do you call yourself when you think of going back to teach in small schoolhouse alone, helping no one in real way?" Rose felt tears starting. "That's not fair." "I don't mean to hurt you," Tallbear said gently, moving closer to her. "But you told me yourself that you never felt like you belonged in white world. Here you belong. Here you are needed and valued and loved." "Loved?" Tallbear took her hands in his. "I love you, Rose. I love your kind heart, your healing hands, your quick mind. I love the way you laugh with the children and listen to the elders' stories. I love how you see good in people even when they are different from you." Rose felt her resolve melting. "I love you too. But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes it is the only thing that is enough." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands and watching the fire burn down to glowing coals. "There's something else," Rose finally said. "Something I haven't told you." "What?" "I'm frightened that if I choose you, if I choose this life, I'll change into someone I don't recognize. That I'll lose myself completely." Tallbear squeezed her hands. "You think becoming Lakota means stopping being Irish? Doesn't it? When river joins with other river, does it stop being river? Or does it become stronger river?" Rose smiled despite her worries. "You always know exactly what to say." "Not always. But I know this. You are not white woman trying to become Indian woman. You are Rose, healer and teacher and bridge builder. This will not change no matter where you live or what clothes you wear." That night Rose barely slept. She walked outside the teepee several times, looking up at the stars and trying to find answers in their ancient light. Each time she thought she had decided, new doubts would creep in. Just before dawn, Winter Moon found her sitting by the dying fire. Troubled thoughts? The older woman asked kindly. I don't know how to choose, Rose admitted. Both paths lead to loss. This is wisdom, Winter Moon said, settling down beside her. Young people think choices should be easy. That right path should be obvious. But important choices are never easy. How do I know what's right? You cannot know for certain. But you can ask yourself, which choice do you make from fear and which do you make from hope? Rose considered this. I think going back would be from fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what people would say. Fear of being different. And staying? Staying would be from hope. Hope for love. Hope for a life that matters. Hope for helping bridge two worlds that need to understand each other. Winter Moon nodded approvingly. Fear makes us small. Hope makes us grow. As the sun rose, Rose knew what she had to do. The meeting was set for midday at a neutral spot between the two camps. Rose dressed carefully in her white woman's clothes, the first time she had worn them in months. They felt strange and restrictive after the comfortable freedom of Lakota dress. All three captives were present: Rose, the older man named William, and the young woman called Beth. Major Harrison and his men sat across from Chief Red Hawk and several of his warriors. Tall Bear stood behind his uncle, his face carefully neutral. We're here to offer safe passage back to your communities, Major Harrison began, along with military escort and supplies to help you restart your lives. William spoke immediately. I want to go back. My wife and children must think I'm dead. Beth nodded eagerly. Yes, please. I want to go home. All eyes turned to Rose. She looked at the soldiers with their clean uniforms and familiar faces, representing everything she had known for the first 22 years of her life. Then she looked at Tall Bear and saw her future in his eyes. I choose to stay, she said clearly. Major Harrison looked shocked. Miss, are you certain? You understand this means giving up your place in civilized society? Rose almost laughed at his definition of civilized. I understand exactly what it means, Major, and I choose to stay. But why? These people are... He struggled for words that wouldn't start a fight. They're not your people. Rose looked around at the faces of the Lakota she had come to love. Chief Red Hawk with his quiet dignity, Winter Moon with her motherly kindness, the children who ran to her for healing, the elders who had taught her their wisdom. With respect, Major, they are my people now, and I am theirs. Chief Red Hawk stepped forward. You heard her choice. Made freely, without force. Major Harrison clearly wasn't happy, but he had no legal right to force Rose to leave if she chose to stay. Very well, but if you change your mind... I won't, Rose said firmly. As the soldiers prepared to leave with William and Beth, Major Harrison approached Rose one last time. Miss, I hope you know what you're doing. Life out here is hard, and getting harder. Life everywhere is hard, Major. The difference is whether you're living it with people you love. After the soldiers left, the camp erupted in celebration. Rose had chosen them, chosen to stay, chosen to become truly one of their people. But the celebration was just the beginning. Chief Red Hawk approached Rose with a serious expression. You have chosen to stay with us, but there is more choice to make. What do you mean? The chief looked at Tall Bear, then back at Rose. My nephew wishes to take you as his wife. This would make you not just member of tribe, but family. Do you accept this honor? Rose looked at Tall Bear, who was watching her with hope and love shining in his eyes. Yes, she said without hesitation. I accept. The cheer that went up from the crowd could probably be heard at the soldiers' camp a mile away. But Rose knew that the hardest part wasn't behind her. It was just beginning. She had chosen love over fear, hope over safety. Now she had. The night after Rose chose to stay with the Lakota was the longest of her life. Even though she had made her decision publicly and felt certain it was right, the weight of what she had done kept her awake until dawn. She had just given up everything she had ever known. Her name would be removed from the settlement's records. People would assume she was dead, or worse, that she had betrayed her own race. She would never again sleep in a proper bed, wear a corset, attend a church service, or read a newspaper. But as she lay on her sleeping robes, listening to the peaceful sounds of the camp settling down for the night, Rose realized something that surprised her. She felt more at peace than she had in years. Early the next morning, Winter Moon woke her gently. Come, daughter, she said softly. Rose's heart skipped at the word daughter. Today we prepare you for your new life. Rose followed Wintermoon to the river, where several other women were waiting. They had brought clothes, jewelry, and other items that Rose didn't recognize. In our traditions, Wintermoon explained, woman who marries leaves her old life completely behind. She is reborn into her husband's family and tribe. Today you stop being white woman named Rose. Today you become Lakota woman with new name. The women began the transformation. They washed Rose's hair with sweet-smelling herbs, then braided it in the complex style of married Lakota women. They painted her face with sacred symbols and dressed her in the most beautiful outfit she had ever seen. The dress was made of soft white buckskin, decorated with hundreds of tiny blue and white beads and patterns that told stories. The sleeves and hem were fringed, and the belt was made of silver medallions that chimed softly when she moved. This was my wedding dress, Wintermoon said, tears in her eyes. My mother's before that and her mother's before her. Now it is yours. Rose touched the dress reverently. I can't take something so precious. You are not taking. You are receiving. Big difference. This dress has seen much love, much happiness. It will bring you the same. The other women added jewelry, silver bracelets, beaded necklaces, and earrings that caught the morning light. Finally, they placed a circlet of eagle feathers on her head. Now you look like Lakota bride, Wintermoon said with satisfaction. But the physical transformation was only the beginning. Over the next several hours, the elder women taught Rose about the responsibilities and privileges of being a Lakota wife. Marriage among our people is not just between man and woman, explained Singing Bird, the oldest woman in the tribe. It is alliance between families, promise to the tribe, commitment to future generations. Rose listened carefully as they explained the customs she would need to follow, the ceremonies she would participate in, and the role she would play in tribal life. As wife of important warrior, you will be expected to counsel other women, help settle disputes, speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, Wintermoon said. Are you prepared for this responsibility? Rose thought about her quiet life as a school teacher, where her biggest responsibility had been making sure children learned their letters. This was much bigger, much more important. I'll do my best to learn and to serve the people well, she promised. Meanwhile, Tall Bear was undergoing his own preparations. Chief Red Hawk had called together the tribal council to discuss the unprecedented marriage between their warrior and the white woman. This union will bring questions from other tribes, from government agents, from everyone, said Grey Wolf, one of the elder warriors. Are we sure this is wise? The woman saved my nephew's life, Chief Red Hawk replied firmly. She has proven her loyalty to our people again and again. She has earned the right to join our family. But what if her brother comes looking for her? What if soldiers come demanding her return? Asked another council member. Tall Bear spoke for the first time. Then we protect her, as we would protect any member of our tribe. She chose us freely. No one has the right to take that choice away from her. The discussion continued for hours. Some council members worried about the precedent this would set. Others pointed out that Rose's healing skills had saved many lives and would continue to be valuable to the tribe. Finally, Chief Red Hawk called for a decision. All in favor of blessing this marriage? One by one, hands were raised. Not unanimously, but by a clear majority. It is decided, Chief Red Hawk announced. The white healing woman will become daughter of our tribe and wife to Tall Bear. That afternoon, Rose faced another challenge. A messenger arrived from the nearby army post with a letter addressed to her. Major Harrison had arranged for it to be delivered, hoping it might change her mind about staying. Rose's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was from Daniel. Dear Rose, it began in his familiar handwriting. The soldiers told me you are alive and safe, but that you have chosen to stay with the Indians. I cannot understand this choice, but I pray you are not being forced against your will. I have been going crazy with worry since the raid. They told me you were dead, and I blamed myself for not being there to protect you. Now they say you are alive but lost to me forever. Please, Rose, if there is any way you can come home, I am waiting. I have saved every penny of my wages to build us a proper house. We could have a good life here. But if you truly choose to stay where you are, then I pray God keeps you safe and happy. You are the only family I have, and I love you no matter what. Your brother always, Daniel. Rose read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Daniel's love and worry were clear in every word, and she felt the pain of separation like a physical wound. Tall Bear found her sitting by the river, still holding the letter. "Bad news?" he asked gently. Rose handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his face growing sad. "Your brother loves you very much," he said when he finished. "Yes, he does. And I love him. This is so much harder than I thought it would be." Tall Bear sat down beside her. "Do you want to change your mind? Go back to him?" Rose looked at him in surprise. "Would you let me? Even now, after everything? Love without freedom is not love. If you stay with me, it must be because you choose to, not because you feel trapped." Rose took the letter back and read it one more time. Then she stood up and walked to the fire pit. Without hesitation, she dropped the letter into the flames. "What are you doing?" Tall Bear asked in shock. "I'm burning my bridges," Rose said, watching the paper curl and turn to ash. "Daniel will always be my brother and I will always love him. But my life is here now with you. I can't keep one foot in each world." Tall Bear stood and put his arms around her. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That evening, the entire tribe gathered for the wedding feast. They had been preparing all day, cooking special foods and decorating the ceremonial area with flowers and feathers. But before the ceremony could begin, there was one more surprise. A lone rider approached the camp just as the sun was setting. Rose's heart stopped when she recognized the horse and rider. It was Daniel. He rode directly to where Rose stood with Tall Bear and the wedding party. His face was dirty and exhausted from hard riding, and his eyes were red with emotion. "Rose," he said, dismounting from his horse. "I had to come. I had to see for myself." Brother and sister looked at each other across the cultural divide that now separated them. Rose in her beautiful Lakota wedding dress, Daniel in his settler's clothes and hat. "You came all this way," Rose said softly. "The soldiers told me you were getting married today. To him." Daniel looked at Tall Bear with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Daniel, this is Tall Bear, the man I'm going to marry." "Tall Bear, this is my brother Daniel." The two men sized each other up carefully. Daniel saw a tall, strong warrior with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Tall Bear saw a young man who looked very much like Rose, with the same red hair and determined expression. "You're really going to do this?" Daniel asked Rose. "Marry an Indian and live like this forever?" "Yes, I am." Daniel looked around at the camp, the teepees, the people dressed in their finest clothes for the wedding. His expression was confused, as if he couldn't understand how his sister could want this life. "But why, Rose? We could have a good life back home. You could teach school, maybe marry a nice Irish man, have children." "I will have children," Rose said gently. "And I will teach them, just like I taught your school children. But they'll be children of two worlds, and they'll help bridge the gap between our peoples." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I feel like I'm losing you forever." Rose stepped forward and took her brother's hands. "You're not losing me, Daniel. You're gaining a family. These people have welcomed me with open hearts. They'll welcome you too if you let them." Chief Red Hawk approached them. "Brother of our daughter is always welcome in our camp," he said in careful English. "You may stay for wedding, stay longer if you wish." Daniel looked surprised by the offer. I don't know. This is all so strange." "Stay tonight at least," Rose pleaded. "See who these people really are. See why I love them." Daniel looked at his sister's face, glowing with happiness despite her tears. He saw the love in Tall Bear's eyes when he looked at Rose. He saw the kindness and dignity of the tribal leaders. "All right," he said finally. "I'll stay for your wedding. But Rose, if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to come home, I am home," Rose said firmly but kindly. The wedding ceremony began just as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Rose had never imagined that her wedding day would look anything like this. But as she stood in the circle of flickering torches, surrounded by the Lakota people who had become her family, she felt more beautiful and more loved than any bride could ever hope to feel. The ceremony started with the sound of drums, deep and rhythmic like a heartbeat. Tall Bear appeared from across the circle, walking slowly toward her. He wore his finest clothes, a shirt decorated with porcupine quills and beadwork, leggings with silver ornaments, and a magnificent headdress with eagle feathers that caught the firelight. But it was his face that took Rose's breath away. His eyes were fixed on her with such love and joy that she felt her heart might burst from happiness. Chief Red Hawk stood between them, looking more like a proud father than a tribal leader. He began speaking in Lakota, his voice carrying clearly across the circle. Winter Moon translated quietly for Daniel, who stood nearby looking overwhelmed by everything he was witnessing. "He says that marriage is sacred bond, not just between man and woman, but between their spirits, their families, their future children, Winter Moon whispered. He says Rose comes to us not as stranger, but as daughter who was lost and now is found. The ceremony continued with rituals that were completely new to Rose, but felt deeply meaningful. Chief Red Hawk sprinkled sacred tobacco on the fire, sending sweet smoke up to the spirits. He spoke about the importance of balance, between husband and wife, between giving and receiving, between individual needs and tribal needs. Then came the part that made Rose's eyes fill with tears. Singing Bird, the eldest woman of the tribe, stepped forward, carrying a beautifully carved wooden bowl filled with water from the sacred spring. This water represents life, Chief Red Hawk explained in English so both Rose and Daniel could understand. Husband and wife will drink from same bowl, showing they share one life now. Tall Bear took the bowl first, drinking deeply, then handed it to Rose. As she drank the cool, sweet water, she felt like she was drinking in her new life, her new identity. But the most moving part of the ceremony was yet to come. Winter Moon approached Rose carrying a bundle wrapped in soft deer hide. Inside was a pair of moccasins beautifully decorated with beadwork and patterns of flowers and birds. I made these for you, Winter Moon said, her voice thick with emotion. When woman marries into Lakota family, she receives new moccasins to carry her forward into new life. These will walk with you on all the paths ahead. Rose sat down while Winter Moon removed her old boots, the last piece of her white woman's clothing, and replaced them with the soft, comfortable moccasins. It was such a simple act, but it felt like the final step in her transformation. Now you walk as Lakota woman, Winter Moon said, helping Rose to her feet. Chief Red Hawk raised his hands for silence. The woman who came to us as Rose O'Sullivan leaves us now. In her place stands Healing Woman, daughter of our tribe, wife to Tall Bear. The crowd erupted in cheers and ululations. Rose, no, Healing Woman, felt overwhelmed by the love and acceptance surrounding her. But there was one more surprise waiting. Daniel stepped forward, looking nervous but determined. In his hands was something Rose recognized immediately, their mother's ring. A simple band of silver with a small green stone that had been passed down through generations of Irish women. Healing Woman, he said awkwardly, then cleared his throat and started again. This was Ma's ring and her mother's before that. I've been carrying it since the raid, hoping someday. His voice broke slightly. I want you to have it. For your wedding. Rose felt tears streaming down her face as Daniel placed the ring on her finger next to the silver band that Tall Bear had given her. Having her mother's ring made her feel like her past and future were connected. Like she wasn't abandoning her heritage but adding to it. Thank you, she whispered, hugging her brother tightly. This means everything to me. Tall Bear stepped forward and clasped Daniel's shoulder. Brother, he said in English, you give precious gift. We are family now. Daniel looked surprised but pleased by the gesture. Family, he repeated, testing the word. The formal ceremony concluded with Chief Red Hawk binding Rose's and Tall Bear's hands together with a cord made of braided sweetgrass. What the spirits have joined, let no man separate, he said solemnly. Walk together in good times and bad, in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health, until the Great Spirit calls you home. As their hands were bound together, Rose felt the rightness of this moment deep in her bones. This was where she belonged, with this man among these people. The religious ceremony was followed by a feast that lasted well into the night. The women had prepared an incredible variety of foods: roasted venison, wild rice cooked with berries, corn cake sweetened with honey, and dozens of other dishes Rose had learned to love during her months with the tribe. Musicians played drums and flutes while people danced around the fire. Rose watched in amazement as warriors performed ceremonial dances that told stories of hunting, war, and peace. The movements were powerful and graceful like nothing she had ever seen. In Irish weddings we have dancing too, she told Tall Bear as they sat together watching the performances. But nothing like this. Show me Irish dance, Tall Bear said with a smile. Rose laughed. I couldn't. Not here, not dressed like this. Why not? This is celebration of joining two worlds. Show us your world's way of celebrating. Encouraged by Winter Moon and the other women, Rose finally agreed to demonstrate a simple Irish reel she had learned as a child. She felt self-conscious at first, but the crowd was so enthusiastic and encouraging that soon she was laughing and dancing with abandon. Other people joined in, trying to copy her steps. Soon there was a wonderful mix of Irish and Lakota dancing happening around the fire, with everyone laughing and having a wonderful time. Daniel, who had been quiet and overwhelmed for most of the evening, finally began to relax. Several young Lakota men had made efforts to include him, showing him their weapons and asking about his work as a blacksmith. When they learned about his skills with metal, they became very interested. "We could use good blacksmith," Chief Red Hawk told him. "Always need tools fixed, weapons repaired. You stay with us if you want. Build forge, teach our young men." Daniel looked around at the faces of these people who were offering him a home and a place among them. I might like that," he said slowly. "But I'd need to go back first, settle my affairs, get my tools." "Of course," the chief said. "You think about it. Door always open." As the celebration continued late into the night, Rose found herself thinking about how perfect this day had been. Not perfect in the way she had imagined as a little girl dreaming of her wedding day. There was no white dress, no church, no familiar faces from her childhood. But perfect in a deeper way. Every moment had felt meaningful. Every ritual had touched her heart. Every person had made her feel welcomed and loved. Around midnight, the crowd began to thin as families with children headed to their teepees. But many people stayed to continue the celebration, and the dancing and singing went on. Finally, Winter Moon approached Rose and Tall Bear. "Time for you to go to your home," she said with a knowing smile. Rose realized with a start that she didn't know where they would be living. During her months in the camp, she had been staying in Winter Moon's teepee, or sometimes with other families when her healing work required it. "We have prepared teepee for you," Tall Bear said, leading her away from the fire. "All your own, where we will start our life together." The teepee was beautiful, larger than most, with painted symbols on the outside that Tall Bear explained represented protection, love, and healing. Inside it was warm and comfortable with soft furs and blankets arranged around a small fire pit. "The women worked all day preparing this while we were in ceremony," Tall Bear explained. "Everything you need for beginning married life." Rose looked around at the carefully arranged space, cooking pots, storage baskets, her healing supplies organized neatly in one corner, and beautiful decorations that made the teepee feel like a real home. "It's perfect," she said softly. As they sat by their own fire for the first time as husband and wife, Rose reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. Less than a year ago, she had been a lonely schoolteacher in a frontier settlement, with no real family except Daniel and no clear purpose in life. Now she was healing woman, wife to a respected warrior, daughter to a tribal chief, and valued member of a community that had embraced her completely. "Are you happy?" Tall Bear asked as if reading her thoughts. Rose looked at his beloved face in the firelight, thought about the love and acceptance she had felt all day, remembered the joy in Winter Moon's eyes and the gradual warming of Daniel's attitude toward her new family. "I have never been happier in my entire life," she said truthfully. "Good," Tall Bear said, pulling her close, "because this is only the beginning of our story." Outside their teepee, they could still hear the sounds of celebration, laughter, singing, and the steady beat of drums that seemed to echo the rhythm of their own hearts. Rose closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of her new world, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges but confident that 5 years had passed since the night healing woman married Tall Bear, and the world had changed in ways none of them could have imagined. She stood outside her teepee on a crisp autumn morning, watching her 3 children play with the other little ones in the camp. Little Fox, her oldest at 4 years old, had his father's strong build and his mother's quick mind. 3-year-old Morningstar was a chattering bundle of energy who followed her big brother everywhere. And baby Thundercloud, just 18 months old, toddled around on chubby legs, getting into everything with the fearless curiosity that reminded everyone of his mother when she first arrived at the camp. The children spoke both Lakota and English fluently, switching between languages as easily as breathing. They were living bridges between 2 worlds, just as Healing Woman had dreamed they would be. But the path to this peaceful morning had not been easy. The first year of marriage had been an adjustment for everyone. Healing Woman had to learn not just how to be a Lakota wife, but how to navigate the complex relationships within the tribe. Some older women had been slow to accept her authority in matters of healing and family disputes. Some warriors questioned whether a white woman could truly understand their ways. But gradually, through patience and persistent kindness, she had won over even the most skeptical tribal members. Her healing skills had saved countless lives during 2 harsh winters and a terrible outbreak of influenza. Her ability to speak English had proven invaluable during increasingly frequent negotiations with government officials. Most importantly, her children had become beloved members of the tribe, proof that love could indeed bridge any divide. Daniel had kept his promise to think about Chief Red Hawk's offer. 3 months after the wedding, he had returned to the camp with a wagon full of blacksmithing tools and a letter from the territorial governor, giving him official permission to trade with the Lakota tribe. He had built a forge on the edge of the camp and quickly became an essential part of the community. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Daniel had fallen in love with a young Lakota woman named Blue Sky. Their courtship had been awkward at first, Daniel struggling to learn Lakota customs, while Blue Sky giggled at his attempts to speak her language. But love had found a way, as it always does, and they had been married 2 years ago. Now Daniel was Uncle Dan to Healing Woman's children and father to his own baby daughter, Little Rose, named for his sister. He had become one of the most respected craftsmen in the tribe, and his forge was always busy with warriors bringing weapons to repair and women bringing pots to mend. The changes hadn't been limited to their small family. The entire world was shifting around them. The great buffalo herds that had sustained the Lakota for generations were nearly gone, hunted to near extinction by white hunters who took only the hides and left the meat to rot on the plains. The railway had brought more and more settlers westward, and the government's pressure on tribes to move to reservations had become impossible to ignore. Chief Red Hawk had grown old and tired from the constant negotiations and broken promises. At 65, he moved more slowly and spoke less often in council meetings. But his wisdom was still valued above all others, and no major decisions were made without his input. The camp itself had changed, too. What had once been a nomadic group following the buffalo had become more settled, with semi-permanent structures and gardens where the women grew corn, beans, and squash. Healing Woman had introduced some of the vegetables she remembered from Ireland, and surprisingly, potatoes had thrived in the prairie soil. But the biggest changes were yet to come. On this particular autumn morning, as Healing Woman watched her children play, a messenger arrived with news that would alter their lives forever. "Government men come," the young warrior reported breathlessly to Chief Red Hawk. "With many soldiers. They say all tribes must move to reservation by spring. No more delays." Healing Woman felt her stomach clench with familiar fear. They had known this day would come, but somehow she had hoped it could be postponed indefinitely. That evening, the tribal council met to discuss their options. The choice was stark. Move voluntarily to the reservation and keep some dignity, or be forced to move at gunpoint and lose everything. "We cannot fight the entire United States Army," Chief Red Hawk said sadly. "Our warriors are brave, but we are too few and our weapons are too old." "Then we become prisoners on reservation," said Grey Wolf bitterly. "Watch our children forget our ways, learn only white man's road." "Not necessarily," Tall Bear said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Over the years, he had become one of the most respected voices in the council, known for finding solutions where others saw only problems. "The reservation will be hard," he continued. "We will lose much. But we will not lose everything if we are smart. We can keep our language, our stories, our ceremonies. We can teach our children both ways, white man's ways to survive in New World, our ways to remember who they are." "And how do we do this?" asked another council member. Tall Bear looked at his wife. "We have among us someone who knows both worlds, someone who can help us learn what we need to learn while keeping what we need to keep." Healing Woman felt all eyes turn to her. The responsibility was overwhelming, but she knew Tall Bear was right. This was why she had been brought to them, why she had stayed, why her children existed, not just to heal bodies, but to help heal the terrible divide between two peoples. "I will help however I can," she said simply. Over the following months, as the tribe prepared for the inevitable move to the reservation, Healing Woman worked tirelessly to prepare them for the changes ahead. She taught English to anyone who wanted to learn, explaining not just the words but the concepts behind them. She helped tribal leaders understand government documents and legal terms. She worked with the children to make sure they could function in both worlds. But perhaps most importantly, she convinced the tribal elders to write down their stories and histories. Working with Daniel, who had learned to read and write Lakota over the years, they created the first written records of many tribal legends and customs. Future generations will thank us, she told Singing Bird as they worked together to record the elders' vast knowledge of healing plants and their uses. Even if they live in white man's world, they will know where they came from. The move to the reservation finally came in the spring of Healing Woman's 6th year with the tribe. It was heartbreaking to watch proud warriors and dignified elders forced to abandon the lands their ancestors had roamed for countless generations, but the tribe's preparation served them well. Unlike many other groups who arrived at reservations confused and helpless, Chief Red Hawk's people knew what to expect. They understood the rules they would have to follow and the compromises they would have to make. Healing Woman's reputation had preceded them. The reservation agent, a surprisingly fair man named Thomas Mitchell, had heard about the white woman who lived among the Lakota and spoke both languages fluently. "Mrs. I'm sorry, what should I call you?" he asked when they first met. "Healing Woman," she replied firmly. "That is my name now." Agent Mitchell nodded respectfully. "Healing Woman, then. I've heard you might be willing to help us establish schools here, teach the children English while helping us understand Lakota customs better." It was exactly the opportunity Healing Woman had hoped for. Over the next few years, she became the bridge between the government officials and the tribal leaders, helping to negotiate policies that were less harsh than they might have been. She established a school that taught both English and Lakota, both white man's history and tribal traditions. It was revolutionary for its time, and it worked. The children learned what they needed to survive in the changing world while maintaining pride in their heritage. Noel Bear adapted to reservation life by becoming a liaison between the tribal police and the traditional chiefs. His diplomatic skills and understanding of both cultures made him invaluable in preventing conflicts and solving problems peacefully. Daniel's skills as a blacksmith were in high demand, not just among the Lakota but among white settlers in the area. His forge became a gathering place where people of both cultures could meet and trade, slowly building understanding between former enemies. As Healing Woman stood in the doorway of her new wooden house, a compromise between government requirements and tribal preferences, she reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying day when she was captured from the burning schoolhouse. Little Fox ran up to her, chattering excitedly in both languages about something he had learned in school that day. Morningstar was close behind, carrying baby Thundercloud, who was babbling happily in his own mixture of Lakota and English. "Mama," Little Fox said, switching to English as he had learned to do when he wanted his full attention. "Teacher Williams says that people like us, with parents from different tribes, are very special. He says we're the future." Healing Woman smiled and ruffled her son's dark hair. "What do you think about that?" Little Fox considered this seriously as he considered everything. "I think it's good to be both things. I can talk to anyone, understand anyone. Maybe someday I can help everyone understand each other." "Maybe you can," Healing Woman agreed. That evening, as she sat with Tall Bear watching the sunset paint the prairie sky in shades of gold and